So as you look through that, not exactly an all-star lineup, from that, people that screwed up big throughout their lives. But what really struck me looking through all that is that these guys weren't any different than you and I were. They messed up a lot. Some of them actually even make us look pretty good with the ways that they messed up. But here's the point of looking at that. If those messed up individuals, if those broken individuals can make it into the quote-unquote Hall of Faith chapter that Hebrews 11 is, then you guys and I can also be in that. Look back at that first point. Look at how broken these people were. These people weren't incredible people. They did do incredible things, but that didn't come about out of how good of people they were. These people were broken just like you and I. But here's the reason they were included in the Hall of Faith, and this is key. I think you guys may even have a fill-in for this. The people in the Hall of Faith didn't necessarily have what other people didn't have. They saw what other people didn't see. They saw what other people didn't see. So let me read that now that you got the fill-in. The people in the Hall of Faith didn't necessarily have what other people didn't have. They saw what other people didn't see. Now, if you look over at me and I'm going like this, what are you guys going to do? Right, you're going to look up. You're not just going to stare at me and say, why is Matt looking up? You don't just continue to stare at that. When you see a person looking up, or when you're outside and you see a person pointing towards the sky, you look up at what they're pointing to or what they're looking at. And this leads us to the second point of this chapter. Point number 2. Look at where they were looking. Look at where they were looking. Now, we already established these people were not incredible people in their own characteristics. They had a lot of flaws, a lot of brokenness. And so it leads you to believe, where did this come from? How can people like that make it into the Hall of Faith that's captured in the Bible for all times? And as I read through Hebrews 11 again this time around, God really struck me with how many times the author uses words like see, seen, looked ahead, looking, looked forward. There's this theme that he's building if you read through it. It's a lot about vision. It's not even so much about what they did, it's about what they were looking at. So let me just give you a couple examples. I think I included the verses there for you guys on the outline. So verse 1, this is a famous verse. Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. What we do not see. Verses 8 and 10, by faith Abraham journeyed to the land of promise as a foreigner. He lived in tents because he looked ahead to a city with foundations, a city laid out and built by God. Now, Don, I know, hates camping, and camping is not the most comfortable thing to do in the world, sleeping on the ground. But look at this. Abraham lived in tents. Even though God had given him the promise of having the promised land, that he would live in it, his people would live in it, he lived in tents. And why did he do that? Because he was looking ahead to a city with foundations, a city laid out and built by God. That wasn't just looking at the promised land. It also is referring to Abraham looking ahead to heaven. He had his eyes fixed on something beyond his current circumstances. And look at verse 27. I really like this in the Voice paraphrase. It says, by faith Moses left for Egypt, unafraid of Pharaoh's wrath, and moving as though he could see the invisible God. Read that again. And moving as though he could see the invisible God. I love that because obviously Moses couldn't see God, actually see him, but his eyes were fixed as though he could see God, even though God was invisible. And that's what drove him. That's what, and even in that verse, that's what made him unafraid of Pharaoh's wrath. Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the whole world at that time. Moses was able to be unafraid of Pharaoh's wrath because he was moving as though he could see the invisible God. Look at verses 13 and 16. This is in the Message paraphrase. You read with me. Each one of these people of faith died not yet having in hand what was promised, but still believing. So all of them died before they were able to see Jesus, before they were able to see the fulfillment of promises. How did they do that? They saw it way off in the distance. They waved their greeting and accepted the fact that they were transients in this world. People who live this way make it plain they are looking for their true home. Again, there's that idea of not just satisfied with what's here, but looking ahead to their true home, to heaven, to God, something better. If they were homesick for the old country, the country that they actually lived in, they could have gone back anytime they wanted. But they were after a far better country than that, heaven country. I love this last line. It says, you can see why God is so proud of them. Isn't that incredible? If God were to say that about us. And I love how Eugene Peterson phrases that there. You can see why God is so proud of them. I mean, that's just effusive in God's praise and God's pride for them. And has a city waiting for them. And then finally, look at right after the Hall of Faith chapter, one of the very first verses we see after that is Hebrews 12:2. It says, let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. But here's the key point in all of that, okay? These people's eyes weren't fixed on who they were. It's your first fill in there. These people's eyes weren't fixed on who they were, so they as individuals. Their eyes were fixed on who God is. Who God is and what he is capable of. What he is capable of. Well, let me read that again now that you have the fill-ins there. These people's eyes weren't fixed on who they were. Their eyes were fixed on who God is and what he is capable of. So that leads us to the third fill-in, I think, on the back. Yeah? You guys not have a back? Great. Yeah? No? Some people do. Okay, well, those of you who don't can take notes. That's what you get when you print things off 5 minutes before. So here's the third point then. The third point is look at what they accomplished. Look at what they accomplished once their eyes were fixed on him. Once their eyes were fixed on him. So it's not about who they were. They were broken people. That's the first point. It was about where they were looking, the second point. And so once they had their eyes fixed on God, like all those people that we just read about, who were looking for something better, looking beyond their current circumstances, that's when they accomplished the great things. We can look at what they accomplished once their eyes were fixed in the right place. So since some of you guys don't have this, I'll read and just follow along. So Hebrews, we read through several of these, but Hebrews 11 concludes after talking about specific people. It says this. I believe this is in the Voice translation. It says, I could give accounts of people alive with faith who conquered kingdoms, brought justice, attained promises, and closed the mouths of hungry lions. I could tell you of people of faith who doused raging fires, who escaped the edge of the sword, made the weak strong, and stoking great valor among the champions of God. I like that. It's almost a better way of saying equipping people for ministry. Stoking great valor among the champions of God. These people sent opposing armies into a panicked flight. I could speak of faith bringing women's loved ones back from the dead, and how the faithful accepted torture instead of earthly deliverance because they believed they would attain a better life in the resurrection. Those are amazing things, guys. And going back to it, it's not because those people were just great people. It's because that their eyes were fixed on a God that could do great things. Their eyes were fixed on a God that could do impossible things. So people were brought back from the dead. Kingdoms were conquered. The mouths of hungry lions were closed. Opposing armies were sent into a panicked flight. Like, these are things that happened because people put their faith in God. And I believe, guys, that those same things, or even greater things, can be accomplished even today in us.